We are up to chapter 20, and I hope we have 4 chapters left till the end of the Sefer, more or less on average about a chapter a week. Not quite, might take us a week or two more. We might have to go a little bit into January before we finish. But my goal is to start Shoftim immediately after we finish Yehoshua. Personal commercial announcement, if I can. Sefer Shoftim is one of my favorite books to teach. So we thought Yehoshua was fun. Shoftim gets really into the nitty-gritty of dynamics and stories. So we'll hopefully have some fun with that too. All right, we're up to chapter 20. And we're going to try to do 20 and 21 today together. It's going to take us at least 2 weeks, but they're really 2 chapters that are connected. So let's see how far we get.
Rabbi Shulman,
Yeah.
sorry, is
Question
there a
away.
shiur next week? It's
Say
Hanukkah.
again.
Will there be a shiur next week?
Somehow, by Nuka, what's the expression?
Hook or by
Somehow
crook?
there will be a shiur next week. If I have to give it from the airport, I will do that. But there will be a shiur next week. Bezrat Hashem.
Thank you.
We're supposed to be flying that day, but a couple of hours after the shiur time. So I might just go to the airport early, find myself a corner, put up my laptop, and give the shiur from there. We'll figure it out. But I don't have both for your benefit and for mine. I don't want to take a break in a week, and I want to make sure we try to get through the material. So my goal is for
Going
there
to be
to
a traveling shiur.
Excuse me?
Going to be a traveling shiur.
Yeah. Okay, what's going on here? Why are we doing this? That's not working. Okay. Vaydaber Hashem el Yehoshua lemor. God spoke to Yehoshua saying, Daber b'nei Yisrael lemor. Speak to Israel, say to them, Tnu lachem et arei hamiklat asher dibarti alechem biyad Moshe. Assign the arei miklat, the cities of refuge, which I commanded, of which I spoke to Moshe. These cities of refuge, these arei miklat, are for a particular purpose. Open parentheses, this is their purpose. Lanus shamarotzeach makenefesh bishkaga bivlidat, so that somebody who's committed manslaughter, who kills a person though unaware or through error or negligence causing death in the typical language of today's legal system. They should be able to take refuge from the Goel Adam, the avenger of blood, the person who's going to, a relative of the deceased who's going to come chase after him and try to kill him. Vinas el echat meharim ha'ela, he shall flee to one of these cities. V'amad petach shar ha'ir, stand at the entrance of the city. V'diber oznei ziknei ha'ir ha'i et dvarav, and he'll speak to the elders of the city and say his piece, say his words, meaning state his case. And they will gather him into the city, and give him a place that he may dwell amongst them. And if the avenger of blood will chase after him, the people, the Zakenim of the city, they will protect him and not deliver him to the redeemer of the avenger, because he smote his neighbor without intent. It wasn't that he was in a fight with him, he hated him, he was trying to hit him, he was trying to hurt him. It was an accident. It was a negligent accident, but nonetheless an accident. He will stay in the city until he has a chance to be heard before the court in judgment. And then he will remain there until the death of the high priest of that generation. As Yeshuva then he can go back to his home. He will go back to his city, into his house, to the place where he fled. Those up to Pasuk Vav, from Pasuk Gimel through Pasuk Vav, is a kind of a summary of the laws of Rotzeach B'Shogeg, of the accidental murderer who exiles to a city of refuge. They are It is a mitzvah, as a parsha in the Torah. It appears in the Torah 4 places. The 2 most extensive places are the end of the book of Bamidbar, Perek Lamed Hey, and Devarim, Perek Yud Tet. We'll look at those sources briefly today as well. This is a kind of a summary of those pieces, so that we have a kind of a picture. So there's a little bit of a chiddush here. There's a few nuances here that are emphasized, that are less emphasized elsewhere. We'll see what they are, but essentially the message here is that it's time to assign these cities. What are these cities? Open parentheses, this is what these cities are. Again, there's a lot of variables here, the Kohen Gadol and the Mishpat, there's a lot of variables here. From a Sefer Yehoshua perspective, the most important thing here is the assignment of the cities. We're dealing with the Nachla, we're dealing with the inheritance and the cities and the allocations. But time permitting, and maybe we'll devote a shir to this next week, we'll talk a little bit about what the Rotzeach B'Shogeg is and why it is important. Parts of that we'll touch upon today. So back to the story. Vayakdishu et Kedesh b'Galil b'Har Naftali, ve'et Shechem b'Har Ephraim, ve'et Kiyat Arbei Chevron b'Har Yehuda. They designated 3 cities as these cities of refuge: Kedesh in the Galil, in the territory of Naphtali, Shechem in Har Ephraim, and Hebron in Har Yehuda. And that's in addition to Me'ever leYarden, Yericho, Mizracha, on the east side of the Yarden. They had already designated 3 cities in the days of Moshe. Natnu et Betzer b'Midbar. They designated the city of Betzer in the Midbar b'Mishom Mate Reuven, the tribal territory of Reuven. Ve'et Ramot b'Gilad Mimate Gad, and Ramot in the Gilad from the tribe of Gad. Et Golan b'Bashan Mimate Menashe, and Menashe in the Golan had designated the city of in the Bashan, the city of Golan. Those were assigned in the time of Moshe. These are the appointed cities for Israel for anybody who kills inadvertently. So he should be protected from the avenger of blood till he stands before the congregation in judgment. That's the mitzvah, the story of the Arei Miklat. The reference here to the 6 cities is interesting. Just pull up a quick map for our benefit. This is, you can see the map on this side, yes? Okay, these are the 6 cities that appear in red as cities of refuge. On the assignment now, Kedesh and Naphtali, north of the Kinneret, Shechem in Har Ephraim, and Hebron in Har Yehuda. And previously, in the days of Moshe, the cities of Betzer, the cities of Ramot Gilad in the Gilad, and the city of Golan in the Bashan. Those were east of the Yarden, and these are the cities west of the Yarden. So in total, there are 6 cities, and that's how they are defined here, the cities of refuge. That's chapter 21. Now, before I move on to chapter 22 for a moment, we're going to come back to all this. There's a lot to unpack here. I'm not skipping it. It's just, in order to get a full picture of this chapter, we have to look at the next chapter also. But before we do that, I want to take us back to the structure of these chapters as they appear in Chumash. We jump to Bamidbar Lamed Hey, the end of Sefer Bamidbar. The end of Sefer Bamidbar, there's a series of chapters in which Moshe prepares the foundation for the children of Israel to enter, to cross the Yarden, to Yehoshua to lead them, and to cross into the land of Israel. Some of this we already looked at. If I go back a chapter to chapter 34, that story begins with Savet b'nei Yisrael v'martalem ki atem ba'im ala aretz Canaan, zot ha'aretz asher tipol lachem benachala, eretz Canaan legvuloteha. Chapter 34 begins with the boundaries of the land of Israel and the borders in large of the Eretz Canaan. We talked about that at length. And then we have, following the borders of the land, there is a next command in the text. Vayitzav Moshe b'nei Yisrael lemor zot ha'aretz asher titnachalu ota b'goral. Once you have the total boundaries of the land of Israel, you have to divide it by tribe. And so you have a goral to divide the land according to the tribes of Israel for the 9.5 remaining tribes, because Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh already received their portion east. And for that you need the leadership of Israel, the tribes, Elazar, Cohen, and Yehoshua ben Nun, and the Nasi of each tribe to map out, to write out L'nachel et bnei Yisrael be'eretz Canaan in order to divide the inheritance of the land. So chapter 34 deals with two subjects in large: the borders of the land of Israel as a whole, and the division of the land of Israel by tribes. Guess what? Just as now, curiosity. This is Bamidbar Lamed Daled. Here's the map that this chapter pulls up. Look familiar? Right? It's the exact same map that our chapter pulls up. Right? That's not an accident. That's because this chapter essentially deals with the same subject of Sefer Yehoshua, Begadol, the borders of the land of Israel and the tribal division of the land of Israel. That's what the first half of the Sefer through chapter 19. Chapters 1 through 12 dealt with the conquest of the whole land, the borders of the land of Israel, and chapters 13 through 19 dealt with the borders of the tribes of Israel and the division according to the Goral. So chapter 34 of Bamidbar more or less maps out to chapters 1 through 19 of Yehoshua. So far, you with me? Okay. Chapter 34. Oh, map is the same map. What's in chapter 35? Vayedaber Hashem al Moshe b'arvot Moav hayaden yerichol lemor. Moshe at the entrance to the land of Israel. Tzav et bnei Yisrael v'natnu la'leviyim min achalat achuzatam arim l'shavet. Moshe, go and give the Levites their cities. Umigrash larehem, and to each city of the Levites you have to give a suburb, a surrounding area that the Levites can use for farming and for whatever they want to do. Vayuharim lahem l'shavet, they will have cities to dwell in. Umigrashem yulevem tam v'luchusham, they'll have suburbs and the area for the livestock and for the substance, for the animals. Umigrashe ha'arim tishet nolavim, and you will give suburbs to the Levites. There's a certain measurement of it. Whatever that measurement is not a subject for now. And in addition to the cities that you will assign to the Levites, in addition to the cities you will give to the Levites, you will assign them at Sheish Arei HaMiklat Asher Titnu Lanu Sham HaRotzeach, 6 cities of refuge for the Rotzeach B'Shogeg. So in addition to the 6 cities of Miklat that will be assigned to the Levites, meaning that of the cities given to the Levites, 6 of them are cities of refuge, and an additional 42 cities given to the Levites. In total, 48 cities to be assigned to the Leviim, the cities and their suburbs and their areas. And the cities that you will assign to the children from the inheritance of the rest of the tribes, larger tribes will give more cities, smaller tribes will give fewer cities. They'll give according to their size. That's the beginning of chapter 35. The continuation of chapter 35. Remember, we're in Chumash, we're in Bamidbar. Vayedaber Hashem al Moshe lemor, daber b'nei Yisrael v'yimarta alehem, ki atem ovrim et haYarden artz Canaan, when you cross over the Yarden, v'ikritim lachem arim, you shall appoint cities, arei miklat, cities of refuge, v'nas sham b'rotzeach makanefesh bishkagat, so that a person who commits manslaughter or who kills negligently will be, albeit unwittingly, shall flee there. They should be refuge from the avenger of blood, so that he should not be killed before he has a chance to stand in judgment before the congregation. You shall have 6 cities in total. 3 on the east side of the Yarden, which you will designate. And another 3 in the land of Canaan. I don't need the map here. Livnei Yisrael v'lotoshav b'tocham ki shesh arim ela limiklat, for all of Israel, 6 cities of refuge, al nushama makanevesh v'shkaga. And then we go into the details of the laws of Hotzeach b'shogeg, which for now I'm going to skip because it'll take us off topic. There's a judgment that takes place for Shaftu Eida ben Amakel ben Goel Adam, and they will determine whether the Goel Adam can stay there. That's the story in Bamidbar. So Sefer Bamidbar essentially has 4 subjects that summarize the preparation for the land of Israel. Those 4 subjects, and here I'm going to turn for a moment to the source page. Those 4 subjects are the borders of the land of Israel, the division of the land by tribe, by Goral, the designation of the Levitical cities, of which 48 cities, of which 6 of them are Miklat. Oh, wait a second. What's an Ir Miklat? An Ir Miklat, you will designate 6 cities for the refuge for the Ir Miklat for the Levium. Sefer Yehoshua, Bigadol, deals with the borders of the land of Israel, like we saw in Bamidbar Lamed Daled. It deals with the division of the tribes by Goral, as we saw in Bamidbar Lamed Daled, and the Ir Miklat, which is in Bamidbar Lamed Hey. What are we missing here in the story? What we haven't gotten to yet? The assignment of the Levitical cities, which came in Chumash, comes before the Ir Miklat. In Yehoshua, something interesting happens. The order is reversed. And going back to the sources in Yehoshua, this was chapter 20. Does everybody see what I'm doing? I've got, it's a little confusing, but I just want you to see that there's an expectation in Chumash. I've already dealt with the borders of the land. I've already dealt with the division of the land, of the tribes by Goral. Now I've dealt with the Levitical cities and then the cities of refuge, the Arei Leviim and then the Arei Miklat. In Yehoshua, I dealt with the borders. I dealt with the tribes. Now I dealt with the Ir Miklat. I'm waiting for the Levitical cities. Guess what? Beginning of chapter 21. The heads of the Levites come over to Yehoshua and Elazar, and say to them, and they said to them in Shiloh, God commanded you to give us cities for our tribes. Essentially what happened here is the Levium come over to Yehoshua and say, wait a second, you went from tribal borders and boundaries to the cities of refuge, but if I follow the sequence in Chumash, the assignment of the Levitical cities came first. So the Levites show up at Yeshua's door and say, wait a second, you forgot about us. And Yeshua says, we didn't forget about you. We just had to do this in the right order. The Arei Miklat had to be assigned first, and then we can come back to you. So the rest of the Bnei Israel gave to the Levites according to their tribal inheritance by God's command, these cities and the lands surrounding them. So this is now the story of the cities of the Levites. So these two stories go hand in hand. And the reason I went through this whole exercise to see the sequence and the reversal and the expectation that ends up saying, hey, wait a second, you forgot about us, is because it highlights the fact that these 2 stories, the cities of the Levites and the cities of the Rotzeach B'Shogeg, right, the manslaughterer, these 2 stories go hand in hand. Sorry, I'm just some adjustments here. Right? They go hand in hand. They're interconnected. And even the sequencing is significant. And that's really the subject of the shir that I want to address today, is what is the relationship between the cities of refuge and the Levitical cities? Why was it in the Torah spelled out the Levitical cities first, then the city of refuge? In Yehoshua, they reversed the order. First they assigned the cities of refuge, and the Levim came and said, what is that about us? They go together. And that's exactly what happens, right? So I go out, and then they assign the various cities. They give the various cities to the Levites by Goral. Remember, there are essentially 4 Levitical families. There are really three, but the Kohanim have their own status. So you have the Kohanim, or Bnei Aaron, and then you have the three Levitical families, Gershon, Kahat, and Merari. So there are four groups within the Levitical arena that are assigned cities. So the first group is the children of Aaron, and they are assigned Mimate Yehuda, Umimate Shimoni, Umimate Benyamin, Bagoral. They are assigned cities taken from the three tribes. Yehuda and Shimon goes together, and Benyamin, because they're a separate tribe, and they are assigned 13 cities from the tribes of Yehuda and Shimon together, and then Benjamin, they're going to take 13 cities out of their tribes and give them to the Levium. For the remaining Bnei Kahat, and from the remaining tribes, Ephraim, Dan, and Menashe west, Goal, Arim, Eser, 10 tribes, 10 cities. B'livnei Gershon, according to the subtribe of Gershon, from the tribes of Yisachar, Asher, and Naphtali, and the half of Menashe and the Bashan, they will get another 13 cities. And for the tribe of Merari, from Reuven, Gad, and Zvulun, they will get another 12 cities. And what appears next in the text is a list of all the cities. It can get very technical, because now it's going to literally list by tribe every assignment of the cities that are given to them. I'm going to open up the map, and lo and behold, there's a map again. 48 cities assigned to the Levium, down and up the country, east and west of the Yarden. I actually have a map here I like even better, and so it's in the source page. And for this, we're going to do our new magic. Voila! New magic. All right. These are a list of all the 48 Levitical cities highlighted in red, and there is in green, you can see here, Hebron, Shechem, Kedesh, Golan, Ramot, and Betzer, the 6 cities of refuge that are a subset of the cities of the Levium. Okay, so far, everything should be clear. More or less, clear as mud. Yes? Okay. There's several obvious questions that have to be asked in this context, and they are, the most important one being is, what is the relationship between the Arei Miklat and the Arei Levium? In Chumash already, we are told, in Bamidbar, Lamed Hey, Moshe is told to assign the cities to the Levium, of which 6 are Arei Miklat. ואת הערים אשר תיתנו ללוויים, את 6 ערי המקלט, ועליהם תיתנו 42 עיר. 6 ערי מקלט, plus another 42 cities. It's like these two stories go hand in hand, they go together. And that's the way it plays out in Chumash, Arei Levium followed by Arei Miklat, and that's the way it plays out in Yehoshua, Arei Miklat first, followed by the Arei Levium. But nonetheless, they have to go together. And the question becomes, if that's the case, what's the relationship between them? Why is it that the Arei Miklat had to be Levitical cities? And I'll even take the question one step further. Were the Levitical cities also cities of refuge? In other words, what was the relationship between them? That's the big question. Another interesting observation here, this mandate to assign the cities of refuge in the Chumash, in Yehoshua, וידבר השם אל יהושע לאמור דבר בני ישראל לאמור תנו לכם את ערי המקלט אשר דיברתי עליכם ביד משה. Does anybody recognize a style here that is unique? There's a phrase here that is really kind of jumps off the text, jumps off the page, and that is the phrase וידבר השם לאמור, דבר בני ישראל לאמור. That's a language that appears all through Chumash. וידבר השם אל משה לאמור, דבר בני ישראל ואמרת עליהם, It's not a phrase that appears in Nach, in Nevi'im. God speaks to the Nevi'im in a much softer language than a command, Vayidaber Hashem el Yehoshua, daber b'nei Yisrael. In fact, Chazal's sensitive ear picked up the fact that this is the only place in all of Tanakh, outside of Chumash, where you have that kind of language. Let's try this little trick again. Oh, this is getting fun. This is it's a Gemara in Makkah. Somebody B'chama bar Chanina. Why is the assignment of the cities of refuge for the Rotzeach B'Shogeg expressed in a language that is harsh, language that is strong? Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe lemor daber b'nei Yisrael. Now, what Chazal are really picking up on is that in all of Nach, and I did a search on the database, there's only two other places in Nach, outside of Chumash, where it says Vayidaber Hashem el. God spoke to his Navi saying, speak to. Like that kind of language, instead of Vayomer, appears in Malachim Bet, in the context of the Chorban to the Nevuah of the Chorban, Vayidaber Hashem b'yad avadav v'im lemor, Korma Hashem, hineni mevi ra'a al Yerushalayim v'Yehuda asher kol shom'at titzal l'shtei oznav. I'm going to bring a harsh decree upon Yerushalayim. It's a Nevuah about the Chorban. And the other in Divrei Hayamim is a reference to God speaking to David HaMelech and critique after the story of Bathsheba. Vayidaber Hashem el Gad chosed David lemor, lech v'dibarta el David lemor. But in most places, God's language and communication with the Nevi'im is much softer. So why is it so harsh here? So the Gemara says it's not because there's tocha, it's not because there's admonition here. It's because mipnei shehen shel Torah, because this is unfinished business in Chumash. We have an unfinished mitzvah in the Torah that has to be completed here, and so this really is a continuation of a mitzvah in the Torah. It's not just the story of Yehoshua; it's a fulfillment of a command from the days of Moshe. Moshe assigned three of the Arei Miklat in Chumash, as we saw in the end of this chapter, and the Mishnah in Makos already points out, where's this Mishnah? Source 6, that lo hayu shalosh shebe'eva hayar ad shelo nivcharu shalosh shebe'eretz Yisrael lo hayu shalosh shebe'eva hayarden koltot. If the 6 cities of refuge were a unit, you were assigned the three cities on the east side of the Yarden, but they didn't operate. They didn't turn the switch on. They didn't power up the power. They didn't start to operate as an Ir Mikla until you had the 3 on the west side of the Yarden, until there was one mitzvah, till the land of Israel was complete, until this moment in Sefer Yehoshua. And so that's really the message, which is that what we have here is the completion of the story of Chumash manifesting itself through the story of Yehoshua in all of its facets, including the unique relationship between the cities of refuge and the cities of the Levium. That's the big surprise here. Why is it so important to link these two? It's not just that the 6 Arei Miklat were Levitical cities, but there's an inherent connection between them. And that's what I wanted to explore with you. What is this inherent connection between them? The 6 Arei Miklat plus the 42 other Levitical cities that were assigned together. What is the relationship between them? In fact, and here come back to the question I started with, which is the Ramban, amongst the Lashonim, is the only one who says that the 6 cities of refuge were the only cities of refuge, and the 42 Levitical cities were not cities of refuge. Ramban is a Das Yachid, he's unique because the Gemara states explicitly that all 48 cities operated as Levitical cities. It says cities of refuge. Because the pasuk says, "Ve'alehem titnu," take 6 cities of refuge, assign them to the Levium, and then add to them another 42 cities. Ve'alehem titnu abim v'shtayim, which means they're all for the cities of refuge. Well, if they're all cities of refuge, there are 2 obvious and immediate questions that have to be addressed. Number one, not only are the cities of refuge Levitical cities, but now all Levitical cities are also cities of refuge. Why? And if that's the case, what's the difference between the 6 cities designated as Arei Miklat and the 42 cities designated as Arei Leviim that are also Arei Miklat? You hear the problem? Right. And Ramban separates them from a pshat perspective, but from a halachic perspective, they're all interconnected. So what's going on? What is it about these Levitical cities that makes them so significant in terms of the connection to the cities of refuge? And here we're going to take us on a little bit of a journey through a number of sources that I hope it kind of will all navigate and become clear at the end. But I want to explore, this is a question I want to address tonight. What's the relationship between Ir Miklat and Ir Levium? Why do they have to be so intrinsically connected that not only is it a given, is it a text, it's a pshat, that every Ir Miklat was also an Ir Levi, but why were the Ir Levium also designated according to almost every opinion in the halacha and in the Mefarshim, also an Ir Miklat? So one approach, or the beginning of our story, is to recognize that the Arei Miklat, right, were not just cities that technically had a court system, and they were designated as places for the Rotzeach B'Shogeg to escape to. They had a unique status. And if you look at the psukim in Shmos, I said that the story of the Arei Miklat appears in 4 places in Chumash, 2 in elaborate form by Midbar Lamed Hey and Dvarim Yatet, 2 in much shorter form, 1 in Shmos Parak Aleph, Hashem Mishpatim. And there it's just very simple. Makeh ish v'met motumat. If a person commits murder, he is to be put to death. Step 1. But Vashir lo tzadah, if he didn't plan to murder somebody, didn't act with premeditation, but it happened that there was such that he ended up killing somebody, I will assign a place for him to escape to run to. So here in Shmos, with the very beginning of Chumash, we don't necessarily know what these places are called. They don't have a status. They're not called Ir Miklat. They're just a place, Makom. Where are they going to run to? They'll run somewhere. I will protect them from the. I will give them some sort of place to escape to. However, says the Torah, if a person commits such a scheme against his fellow to kill them with cunning, with orma, with secrecy, then I will hold them accountable. Even you can even pull them off the mizbech. So there's a couple of issues here. First of all, what is this makom that's so designated for the Rotzeach B'Shogeg before we have cities? Right? They're in the Midbar, they're in the Har Sinai, they don't have cities. Second of all, what's the relationship between Pasuk Yud Gimel and Pasuk Yud Daled? Where if you committed murder inadvertently, accidentally, I will give you a place to run to. But if it was done with premeditation, not only premeditation, but in secret and cunning, you can even pull the murderer off the Mizbeach. Where did the Mizbeach come from? Where did this altar reference come from? It's almost like the assumption that the cunning, the secrecy, was a claim by the murderer that they were acting inadvertently to hide their actions. If they committed premeditated murder and there was witnesses and there was warning and there was Bezdin, etc. So, okay, so the Bezdin puts them to death. But now that's not the normal case. Normal case, most people claim they didn't mean it. They didn't want to do it. They didn't do it. It was an accident. Maybe. It was negligence. Maybe. Or they didn't do anything. They hid. They covered up their crimes. So if they tried to cover up the crimes and claim or argue that they were acting inadvertently, then you hold them accountable, even off the Mizbech, which means that where do they go to? They went to the Mizbech. So we have a story in Chumash where somebody who commits a murder in cunning, in guile, in secrecy, in a way in which they claim that they were innocent, and they ran to the altar for sanction, for sanctuary, for refuge. That's the story of Yoav in the beginning of the book of Kings. We read part of it in the Haftarah of Pasha Vayechi. And Shlomo Melech pulls him off the Mizbeach to hold him accountable for his actions. But there's a certain contrast here between the Mizbeach and the place that the Rotzeach will run to if they are trying to escape because they acted not premeditatedly, but inadvertently. And that leads Chazal to the following statement, Gemara in Makos, V'samti lecha makom, I will give you a place to run to. Now, while you are alive, b'chayecha, in other words, not waiting for the next generation, from your place, makom mimkomcham, you, Moshe, melamed shayu yisum mekalim b'midbar. There was an exile of Lutzeach b'shogeg. If it occurred, that the laws of Lutzeach b'shogeg applied even in the desert. In the desert, there are no cities. There's no Ir Miklat. So where do they run to? Lechan Maglin, Lemachane Levia. They ran to the Levitical camp. They ran into the world of the Levium. So that's another fascinating piece. When they come to the land of Israel, the Levium are going to be the cities in which the Rotzeach b'Shogeg can run to. In the desert, they also have to run to somewhere. Where do they run to? The city, the camp of the Levium. What is it about the Levium and the Rotzeach b'Shogeg? And every time I turn around, I've got this connection between the two of them. So let's come back to the question I asked at the beginning, which is the Gemara's question, which is, if I have 6 cities of refuge, and then I have a camp of Levium, or in this case, 42 Levitical cities, and those 42 Levitical cities are also places to run to for refuge, what's the difference between them? And here, the Gemara says something very obscure, needs to be unpacked. Halalu, these, meaning the cities of refuge, the 6 cities, koltot ben ladat ben shelo ladat, they admit, you can escape there, whether deliberately or inadvertently. Where halalu, the rest of the cities, the other 42 cities, shelo ladat and koltot, they only can serve as refuge if they are deliberate, not inadvertent. What's going on? So let's start with Rashi. Simple explanation. A person commits. Let's go back to the notion of what the Rotzeach b'Shogeg is all about. There are 4 categories in halachic terms of somebody who commits murder. Murder in the first degree, in legal terms, is premeditated. Person intends to kill somebody. They are under the jurisdiction of the Bezdin. Bezdin will hold them accountable. Bezdin will judge them. Bezdin will execute them. It's a capital crime. Murder in the second degree means that you were trying to hurt somebody. There was an enmity there. There was actual effort to try to hurt them. But you didn't intend to kill them. It just turns out that you were a little bit more violent than you should have been, and you ended up killing them. It's called murder in the second degree. There you have a Goel Adam who's going to chase them to the end of the earth, and the Goel Adam is the full right to hold them accountable. But the role of the Goel Adam is a whole different share. Then I have a third category, what in halachic terms is called negligence causing death. There has to be an element of pshia, of negligence, for the Rotzeach b'Shogeg to be considered exilable to the cities of refuge. If it's purely accidental, that was unavoidable, then that's called onus, and there's no role for the Gol Adam. The guy walks scot-free, and there is no city of refuge role there at all. So cities of refuge is limited to a very specific case. But the difference between what seems like the goal of the city of refuge, the negligence causing death, versus the enemy who's the second degree murder, person who's trying to cause harm, but that wasn't trying to kill, ended up going too far. Right? The subtle difference between them is not something that's clear unless you have somebody to clarify the situation. So such a person, this Rotzach B'Shogeg, begins to run, and he's going to run to the closest city of refuge. There are, in fact, 6. Let me pull up this map. Right? Whoa. What just happened? There we go. There are, in fact, 6 cities of refuge. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And Chazal even say that they are, in the Mishnah and Makos, that they are more or less evenly dispersed through the land. So it should be relatively, wherever you are, there's an Ir Miklat within reach. But within reach depends on how far the Gol Adam behind you is. If you're here in Ktamot and you want to get to Betzer, or if you're here in Devir and you want to get to Hebron, that's within reach. Okay, so maybe you could outrun the Gol Adam. But if you're in, I don't know, Gezer, or if you're here in Tel Dan, or anywhere, okay, you're in Yokneam and you want to get to Golan or Kedesh, that's a long distance. And Gol Adam is on your tail. So what happens if you can't get there quick enough? So then the halacha is, okay, so we'll give you an option to run to somewhere closer. The first goal is to get to the Ir Miklat. The Ir Miklat is that's your refuge. But if you can't get to the Ir Miklat, then you end up stumbling into a Levitical city. The Levitical city will also protect you. And here Rashi says, what is Shalom Midat? Ben shebarach sham ladat klita, ben shelo barach sham ladat klita. Meaning, in the cities of refuge, you ran, you happened to come into an Ir Miklat, or you ran and you were trying to get to an Ir Miklat, but you didn't know which city you were going to. You entered into that city, it protects you. You come in, the gates close, you're protected. There's Levitical cities were a second line of defense. You couldn't get to an Ir Miklat fast enough. You could get to an Ir Miklat in the next level. But Rashi places the entire onus of the intent on the person running. Sfat Emet comes along and says, wait a second, the person running, he's trying to get to the nearest city he can get to. So he suggests that the dat here, the intent here, is the intent of the elders of the city. Dat balabayit shebayir. Meaning, and this is the nuance here, that when he gets to the cities of refuge, there's a difference between them. In the city of refuge, in Ir Miklat, the doors open, the gates open, he's brought in, and he's protected regardless. In fact, Chazal say he doesn't even have to pay rent. He can stay there until the Kohen Gadol dies, rent-free. But in a Levitical city, he has to pay rent. Levitical city, he is only there if the Levites open up their doors. If the if the Levites consider his case legitimate. And that's where the text in Yehoshua says that when he comes to the city, before he enters the city, Amad Petach Shar Ha'ir, he'll stand at the outside of the city, V'diber bo oznei ziknei ha'ir, and he'll state his case. And then a sport they will bring him in. That's true if he has to defend his case before he enters the city. That says the Sfat Emet, says the uniqueness over here. But in all cases, the Ir Miklat is designed to give him refuge, to protect him from the Gol Adam who is seeking his death. He claims he acted inadvertently, and he ends up coming into the city of the Levites, whether Miklat, whether a Levitical city, whether that was his intentional destination or not. He ends up coming into the city under the umbrella and auspices and protection not just of a city, but of a city of Levium. And that's really the core of the issue. Is that the Torah goes out of its way to place the story of the Vatzeach B'Shogeg in the jurisdiction of the Levium. And it's interesting, these are two elements of society that you would not necessarily put together. Vatzeach B'Shogeg is somebody who's committed an act that is unavoidable, that was avoidable, that was an act of negligence, and his punishment is exile. It's hard to understand. Chazal used the language of exile for the Rotzeach B'Shogeg. Where does he exile to? Where does he goleh? He is goleh. He enters into galut. He has to be exiled from his city, exiled from his home, exiled from his land. And he'll stay in exile until the death of the Kohen Gadol, which we'll deal with in another shir. His language is that he's exiled because he's guilty on a certain level. There's an element of pshia, there's an element of negligence there. So he comes from a certain element of society that was negligent in their attitude towards life, negligent in how they conducted themselves, and they are in exile now. And the classic paradigm of the Rotzeach B'Shogeg, interestingly, in Chazal, is none other than Cain, which is fascinating because Cain committed premeditated murder. Or maybe not. Maybe he committed murder in the second degree because he rose up against his brother, smote him, and he killed him. Meaning, it's not clear that he meant to kill him or meant to hurt him. Maybe it was second degree. Unclear. But in all cases, Chazal say that even though he committed murder intentionally, Kayin harag v'lo hayala mimilamot, but he had nobody to learn from. He was the first. There was no precedent. And therefore, his decree, his punishment, was like a Rotzeach B'Shogeg. What's the decree against Cain? What was the punishment? Navenati abaretz. You go into exile. Cain went into exile. So Cain becomes the paradigm, the first example of Rotzeach B'Shogeg, even though he wasn't B'Shogeg. But the concept is, right, so you put Cain together with the Levium, you're talking about a part of the lower end of society, right? Somebody who's committed a terrible crime, together with the Levium who were Kadosh, the Levium who were holy, the Levium who were Yom Mishpatech Yaakov. They had to teach Torah to Bnei Israel. They were the Levium were the Shoftim, they were the judges of that time. Torah Hashem Yivakshim Yipiu. And you're putting these two groups together, and the answer is, yeah, that's who you put together. Shevet Levi is a beautiful Rambam. The Rambam talks about the role of Shevet Levi. They had no portion of land in the land of Israel. The rest of Israel was commanded to give them cities. 6 are in Miklat, and another 42 cities. In the same chapter, in the laws of Yovel, dealing with the Levites, the Rambam describes who the Levium were. Why did Levi not get a portion of land in the land of Israel? Because he was defined, his role was to serve in the temple. To teach Torah, and to teach the laws. In public, as it says, Yisrael. You shall teach the psukim in Malachi. You will teach, actually, that's a pasuk in Chumash. Yom Mishpatech Yaakov. They will teach Torah to the children of Israel. Therefore, they were separated and designated for a particular role. They didn't serve in the army, and they couldn't take biza. They couldn't take the benefits of war either. They weren't entitled to it. But also, Hashem. So these Levium, these are the people sitting in this city, they are now the ones to take responsibility for the Rotzeach B'Shogeg. And you know what? That's exactly what the Torah says. They are the ones to take responsibility for the Rotzeach B'Shogeg. You can't, it's like taking an element of society that needs to be taught the value and the spiritual elements of value of Torah in life, and you put them into the proximity of the element of the group within society that's responsible for exactly that message. And so you take the Ritzach B'Shogeg and you put them under the jurisdiction of the Levi, and you have a built-in rehabilitation system. It's a fascinating perspective. I think a built-in rehabilitation system, a structure in society to look to address the needs, the educational, moral needs of this group called the Ritzach B'Shogeg. And it has to be a Levitical city. It has to be a place of the Shekhinah, it has to be a place of Kedusha, because that's the message of the Torah. So that's one solution of the Torah. Take this element of the Ritzach B'Shogeg and put them under the jurisdiction of the Levium. Let the Levium teach them, guide them, help them, protect them, but at the end of the day, enable them to go back after the death of the Kohen Gadol, to go back to their home. That's one piece of the story. There's another piece of the story. And that's what I want to look at in the last couple of minutes. Because from the beginning of Sefer Yehoshua, and really throughout our study, we've recognized how many times the Torah emphasized that the land of Israel was assigned to the tribes by Goral. We saw it in Bamidbar Lamed Hey and Lamed Dalet, right? The Torah first starts with the Goral of the Shvatim, and then it talks about the Yarei Miklot and the Yarei Leviim. We saw it in Yehoshua. We had the Goralot, chapters 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, divide the land by tribes. But every time in Chumash, in Yehoshua, every time the Torah describes how the land of Israel was divided by tribe, by Goral, the Navi emphasized everybody except who doesn't have a Goral, who doesn't have a tribe, who doesn't have land, the Levium. Right? And that emphasis we saw over and over again. Did I put it on the source page? No, I'll walk you through it very quickly. We'll start with Yehoshua Paragid Gimel, the first place the Goralot are mentioned, right? In extensive operation, right? Yehoshua says to them, okay, here's a land that is still not yet divided by tribe. We spent some time studying chapter 13. All the land east of the Yarden, etc. Rak l'shevet halevi lo natan nachala. God didn't assign the Levites a nachla. He assigned every other tribe a nachla except the Levium. Isher Hashem Elokei Yisrael nachalato, because their portion is in the temple. They don't have a nachla. Come to the end of the parak, Yehoshua, after all of the description of the east side of the Yarden and all the tribes there, Moshe didn't assign Nachla to the Levium. Okay? So what about the rest of the tribes of Israel? So chapter 14 is the tribes of Yehuda and Shimon, and then chapters moves and Menashe and Ephraim, and then he moves the Mishkan to Shiloh, and he gets to the rest of the tribes, Binyamin and Gad, all the rest of the tribes are there. Come to the end of chapter 18. So Shiloh, they come to Shiloh, and he says to them, there's still tribes that haven't taken their land. There's take 3 people per tribe, go divide the land, etc. Right? And come bring me the Goral, and I will Shiloh lifnei Hashem. He divided the land according to the Goral Kimach, except for I will throw the lots here. Everybody except the Levi. Again, the emphasis. Everybody except the Levi. Why is it constantly everybody except? Why is this emphasized so much? Everybody except the Levi. I'll go one step further. The Levi is fascinating. In Chumash, if I look at the description of the Levium, Dvarim Yudal, a whole bunch of sources, and I put them all on the page for you. Devarim Yudalet. Halevi asher b'sharecha lo tazvenu. Don't abandon the Levi in your midst. Ki ein lo chelek v'nachalai mach. He has no chelek, he has no inheritance with you. And therefore, there's maaseh, there's therefore tithes. Uva Levi, the Levi will come to get his tithes at the end of the 3 years. Ki ein lo chelek v'nachalai. He has no portion with you. Ve'ager, ve'ayatom, ve'ha'almana asher b'sharecha. The Levi goes together with the ger, the yatom, the almana in your gates. In your gates. In Dvarim Tetzayin, Halevi asher b'sharecha, the Levi in your gates, and the ger, the stranger, the hayatom, and the widow, and the almana, and the orphan, and the widow, who is in your midst. Why does the Torah constantly put the Levi, ger, yatom, almana together and in the shah, which is the place of the mishpah? What's going on here? And the answer, I think, is very simple. If they have, who doesn't have land? If you don't have land, you don't have a source of parnasa. If you don't have land in an agricultural society, you have no source of sustenance. You have no source of being able to provide for yourself, to work for yourself, to be able to farm for yourself, to be able to produce for yourself. Land was everything in the land of Israel. If you didn't have, remember, before you assigned the 42 cities or the 48 cities. The Levi goes together with a group of people in the land of Israel that don't have an important inheritance, that don't have a portion, that don't have a land, that don't have a source of parnasa. The Levi, the ger. The ger means, whether it means a convert or whether it means a non-Israelite citizen, a ger toshav. Either way, they don't have land, they don't have inheritance. Or the widow or the orphan that doesn't have a source of parnasa. They all go together. The common denominator between all these groups is they have the source of parnasa. They don't have land. They don't have an inheritance. I'm going to add to that group one more category of society that doesn't have land, that doesn't have nachla, that doesn't have an inheritance. The Levi, the ger, the yatom, the almana. One more group. The rotzech b'shogeg. Because he is exiled from his land, exiled from his house, exiled from his property. For an entire generation, after the death of the Conquest, it goes back to his bayit and to his ear. But for that generation, he's in exile. It's called exile. Right? So, what's the message? Here's the question. You take 12 tribes, 13 tribes. You divide them up and down the course of the land, and you divide them by tribe. Reuven is responsible for Reuven, Judah is responsible for Judah, Benjamin is responsible for Benjamin, Ephraim is responsible for Ephraim. Who's responsible for the Levite who has no land? Who's responsible for the ger, for the yatom that has no land? Who's responsible for the rotzech b'shogeg, who's to exile from his land? Who is responsible for the tribeless, landless element of society? Whether they're from the upper elements of society, like the Levium, or whether they are from the vulnerable elements of society. Who is going to take responsibility for them? God is looking after God, Menashe is looking after Menashe, Naphtali is looking after Naphtali. And who's looking after the Israelites as a people, as a nation? The danger in the division of the land by tribes is that it is dangerously able to turn these 12 tribes into 12 separate groups that could fight with each other, war with each other, struggle with each other, that each one is looking after themselves. And that's exactly what happens in the book of Shoftim. There are 3 civil wars in the book of Shoftim, all between tribes. There's an inherent danger in the message of, I will divide the land to you by Goral. I will give you each tribe their own territory. I, God, will assign the tribe of Menashe and of Gad or Ephraim here. Do the Ephraim come along and say, God gave me this land. God gave me this land. It's my land. It's my tribe. It's my nation. What about all the people who have no tribe, who have no land, who have no parnasa, who are exiled? And here the Torah does something extraordinary and so important. And it says to all the 12 tribes, that's why it's after all the division of tribes, it says to the totality of the Jewish people as a nation, daber b'nei Yisrael. Tnu lachem et arei miklat. You have to designate the arei miklat. You, B'nai Yisrael, you 12 tribes, have to give the 42 cities of the Levium. You have to take cities from within your own tribe and you have to donate them to these tribeless groups. And suddenly the messaging here is you're not just 12 tribes. You belong to a common thread. You belong to a common goal. You belong to a common people. There's a Mishkan, there's a tabernacle in Shiloh that is supposed to be the place of Avodat Hashem for all of Israel. And there are Leviim who serve in that Mishkan that are scattered throughout the land. Who's going to look after them? Every one of the tribes is going to devote land to the Leviim. I gave you a chart here. This is a list of all the tribes and which cities they assigned to the Leviim. All 48 cities. And to each subset of the families of tribes, more or less equal division. The tribes were responsible for, as a group, as a whole, suddenly there was a national agenda. Suddenly there was a national campaign, there was a national need and message. And that's the issue. I call it the transformation from tribalism to nationalism, because it's the first time since we started the division. I'm going to stop sharing for now. The first time since we started the division by tribes, which was the core of the message of Sefer Yehoshua from the very beginning. But Yehoshua led a national campaign, chapter 11, chapter 12. But from chapter 13, we start to divide the land by tribes. Suddenly there is this message that each tribe was designated by God to be in a separate place, almost as a separate nation, separate tribe. Something needs to connect them. So Yehoshua moves the Mishkan to Shiloh to connect them. The Levium will connect them. They work in the Mishkan. But they have to be assigned, and they have to be taken as a national project. And the national project is the project taken upon themselves by the tribes. You, Titnu, you have to give them the cities of refuge. You have to give them the cities of the Levium. You have to take responsibility for the Ratzach B'Shogeg, which is a national society, a national issue. If they're running from one tribe to another. They don't have time to cross borders to check the papers at the border crossing between Ephraim and Manasseh. They're running from the Goel Adam. There needs to be extraterritoriality. There needs to be across the borders. There needs to be a sense that this is one nation, not just 12 tribes. This is the key message. Yehoshua ends with this message. We're not 12 tribes, we're one people, even if we're divided by tribes. It's a message which does not register. Sefer Shoftim is a terrible indictment of this issue. It won't really register until the book of Shmuel, until David HaMelech, who really is the first one to bring them together into a banner of nationalism. So for 400 years, they're going to struggle with this issue. But Yehoshua already identifies it, the Torah identifies it, the inherent danger of tribalism when you divide the land by tribes. Necessary and dangerous. And so the Torah comes up with two solutions for now. There'll be more. One solution is to take care of the Levium and to see them as a national project. And the other is to take care of the Rotzech, who's running from city to city and has to cross borders and bring them together. And that, I think, is also part of why the Levium and the Miklat go together. All right, taking 5 minutes longer than I should have. Apologize for that. Hope this was helpful to you and I didn't confuse you too much. Happy to take questions.
Got a question.
Yeah.
The Rotzech, when he's running for the Miklat, he can't get there. He goes to a city of the Levium. Okay. Does he stay there until the Kohen Gadol passes away?
Yeah. Can't leave. If he leaves, he's at the risk of the Goel Adam.
So he shouldn't bother going to an Ir Miklat. He should just stay where
once he's there, he's there.
Okay.
Once the Levium judge, and so the Levium would judge him, there was Shoftim. Once that's why it makes sense to go to an Ir Levi, because they were the judges. Once his case has been stated and he's been determined to be a Ratzach B'Shogeg, he's protected there and stay there until the story of the Goel Adam, the Kohen Gadol.
Question.
Yeah.
What was originally the intention of building a nation, a tribal nation, rather than a cohesive Bnei Israel? What's the advantage of it?
I don't necessarily know that there's an advantage other than character, but I do know that if you go back to Chumash, we're about to read Parsha Vayeshev. You can go back even further. You can go back to Yaakov and Esav, and you can go back to Yitzchak and Yishmael, and you can go back to. I don't think there was ever a moment in the origin development of Israel that started from a cohesive element. It starts from division. It starts from the tribes. It starts from the conflicts. It starts from Mechirat Yosef. It will take history to heal that rift. And at times it'll rupture, and at times it'll be healed again, right? The kingdom splits apart and comes back together, splits apart and comes back together. It's the nature of human beings to be territorial, tribal, identified by their own flag, and they need something that will eventually unite them together. So I can only imagine from a historical perspective that it was almost impossible task to assume that they're all going to be 2 million people under one banner and one. There's nothing to identify them together. There's nothing to. It'll take a melech to bring them together, and that's really our segue into the book of Shmuel, at the end of Sefer Shoftim. That eventually the only way to take a group of people, whether they're people, tribes, families, households, the only way to bring them together really under one identity is to create a national flag. And for that, you need a melech. So that's what's the transition from Moshe to Yeshua to Shoftim will eventually lead us to a melech. This will be the thread that will carry us through the book of Shoftim. They need to get to a melech.
Okay. See ya soon. Have a good trip.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
No problem. Thank you. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
And Shmuel was against it because he didn't think they were ready.
Well, yeah, so we'll study when we get to Shmuel, we'll talk about why Shmuel was against it. Shmuel was against it not because he was against the goal, but because he didn't think they were looking, their request for Malchus wasn't because of this goal.
Kechol Hamim.
Right. There's God's, there is the objective need for a Malchus, which is stated at the end of Sefer Shoftim. And there is the subjective advantages that people saw in a Malchus which were problematic. War and army and defense, etc. So there was a conflict of interests there. That's what it takes us to David and Melech eventually, to put it all together.
Thank you.
My pleasure.